Very large population of young adults, adolescents are speaking to ChatGPT, talking very intimate things and using it as a therapist like there is not tomorrow. So they know that they are possibly, or at least they like to know, or they like to believe that they are talking to somebody completely anonymous. Nobody's going to know about this conversation, and therefore everything is secure. They have a quiet place where they can bear their soul out. ChatGPT ने तो ये कभी नहीं बोला कि आपकी सारी कॉन्वर्सेशन सिक्योर है. चैट जीपीटी ने तो कभी ये नहीं बोला कि जो भी बातें आपके साथ हो रही हैं उसको मॉडल को ट्रेन करने के लिए यूज नहीं किया जाएगा. सो इमेजिन आवर बिगेस्ट वल्नरेबिलिटीज टुडे आर नोन टू समबडी हु इज अननोन टू अस, and therefore today the situation is so grim that there is no law to protect that data. There is no protection of that conversation between us and the chatbot, and we are just a hack away from a social disaster. So a lot of people are coming and asking me these days whether the use of AI for legal advice, for therapy, is it within the frame of law? Is it legal to use it? And is it beneficial to use it? Now, the moment I heard this, that there is an extensive use of AI happening today with the common citizens to discuss their legal problems or maybe use it as a therapist, it evoked mixed reactions in my mind, and I would really want to discuss what are the ramifications of what is happening at the moment. So before we move on to the question ki whether it is advisable to use an AI chatbot for legal advice, for therapy, I think first let's understand what an AI tool is and what is it capable of doing, and then we'll obviously move on to what are the ramifications and what is the legal framework around it. क्या है एक AI चैटबॉट? एक AI चैटबॉट एक LLM है, लार्ज लैंग्वेज मॉडल है. उसको बिलियंस एंड ट्रिलियंस बुक्स एंड टेक्स्ट एंड लिटरेचर पे ट्रेन किया हुआ है. सो इट्स बेसिकली अ लार्ज डेटा सेट दैट इज वर्किंग ऑन द इनपुट्स गिवन टू इट, एंड बेसिस द डेटा सेट दैट इट इज ट्रेन्ड ऑन, इट इज चूजिंग द मोस्ट लॉजिकल आउटपुट दैट शुड बी आउट देयर. अब चाहे वो लीगल एडवाइस के लिए हो, चाहे वो थेरेपी के लिए हो, एक AI चैटबॉट का रिस्पॉन्स इज बेसिकली एन एल्गोरिथमिक रिस्पॉन्स जो ये बताता है कि बेस्ट एंड मोस्ट लॉजिकल आंसर क्या हो सकता है. अब फर्ज कीजिए कोई इस AI चैटबॉट को थेरेपी के लिए यूज कर रहा है. नाउ द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन दैट अराइजेस इन माय माइंड इज कि क्या AI is a decent therapist that can prevent somebody from possibly committing suicide or somebody who's having a panic attack? To the knowledge that I have gained, to the reading that I have done, I realize that ऐसा है. बहुत सारे चैटबॉट्स को एंडोर्स कर रहे हैं बहुत सारे थेरेपिस्ट कि अगर एक चैटबॉट को थेरेपी के लिए यूज किया जाए तो एज द फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्स एक चैटबॉट काफी इफेक्टिव है. सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल, रात के 2 बजे हैं और आप you're going through a panic attack or you're about to go through a panic attack, and then you go to a chatbot, seek help. It helps you recollect your coping routine. Now that's the kind of therapeutic first aid that is obviously endorsed by a lot of professional therapists. However, now imagine a situation where instead of becoming your therapist, the AI is becoming your echo chamber. Now, देखो, समझने की बात यह है कि AI को ट्रेन कैसे किया है. एक कॉमन वर्ड जो AI के लिए यूज होता है, which the CEO of AI also uses quite many times, is that the AI is trained in its behavior to be a little sycophantic. Sycophantic का मतलब है somebody who's eager to please. तो अब जब आप पर्पसली उसको यूज कर रहे हैं एज अ थेरेपिस्ट for seeking therapy, and the AI in response is trying to be sycophantic, that's a recipe for disaster. So क्या clinical validity है therapy की which is being done by an AI? I am not sure. Let's assume for a minute that there is certain degree of clinical certainty, at least for the first response. But beyond that, what is the story of AI to give therapy to people? अब मैं आपको कुछ एग्जाम्पल्स देता हूँ. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर कुछ मिनट के लिए मान भी लिया जाए that there is a certain degree of professional reliance or professional endorsement towards AI becoming a therapist, at least for the first response, but उसके बाद क्या? देखो, मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि मुझे पता नहीं है कि हमारा the entire infrastructure of hiring a professional therapist is completely broken. There's a dearth of professional therapists. There is a dearth of the time that they have. There is a limited amount of people wanting to use a therapist, to discuss their issues. और जनरल अडेप्टेबिलिटी इशू भी है. तो चैट जीपीटी क्यों सब्सक्राइब हो रहा है या कोई भी एआई मॉडल क्यों सब्सक्राइब हो रहा है थेरेपी के लिए? बिकॉज वो एक सेफ हार्बर है. जब कोई चैट जीपीटी से बात कर रहा है तो दे नो दैट दे आर पॉसिबली, और एटलीस्ट दे लाइक टू नो और दे लाइक टू बिलीव दैट दे आर टॉकिंग टू समबडी completely anonymous. Nobody's going to know about this conversation. Nobody's going to know anything about what they're talking. And therefore, everything is secure. They have a quiet place where they can bear their soul out. Aaj, a lot of people are trying to use these models as therapists, not because therapy बहुत अच्छी मिल रही है, या they're actually getting cured or they're able to get better in their minds. But I think one of the reasons that they're using it because they are not being judged. And since the model is based on a system of sycophancy, there is a larger adoption with a lot of people. But इसमें ना एक बड़ी disturbing trend emerge हो रही है. चैट जीपीटी ने तो ये कभी नहीं बोला कि आपकी सारी conversation secure है. चैट जीपीटी ने तो कभी ये नहीं बोला कि जो भी बातें आपके साथ हो रही हैं उसको मॉडल को ट्रेन करने के लिए यूज नहीं किया जाएगा. इनफैक्ट I'm an avid user of AI models, especially ChatGPT 5.0. I realized there is an option of a temporary chat where that chat will not be stored, and they categorically say कि ये वाली chat will not be used to train my model. That by corollary means that the other chats, whichever form and manner I am having, whether it is for therapy or for legal advice, those chats may and can be used for training their model. There was an incident where a lady spoke her heart out to ChatGPT, where she was discussing her problems, her boss, the toxic work culture, etc., etc. Or in the same contemporaneous period, there was this wannabe writer who wanted to write a book about workplace toxicity and wanted a great story. Interestingly, what happened is, and I also picked it up from secondary sources, so don't hold me to the source, but interestingly, ChatGPT narrated the exact same story that the lady had described to it to create a book to a wannabe writer. Now imagine the consequence of all of this. Your life story can tomorrow be somebody's book without you even knowing it. And a bigger challenge here is that at least when adults use it as a therapist, they're broadly aware, they're mature enough to understand that हम एक chatbot से बात कर रहे हैं. There is no flesh and blood on the other side. And that's why they're also aware कि the degree of experience, the cultural factors involved in your conversation and the professional judgment involved in the conversation may not be there. But at least they'll get certain degree of help and support. बट जो मेरे लिए बहुत चिंता की बात है, एंड दिस इज नॉट ओनली एज अ सिटीजन बट ऑल्सो एज अ लॉयर, इज दैट अ वेरी वेरी लार्ज पॉपुलेशन ऑफ यंग एडल्ट्स, adolescents are speaking to ChatGPT, talking very intimate things and using it as a therapist like there is no tomorrow. What compounds to the problem is that most of these young adults may not even realize that they're not talking to somebody in flesh and blood and they're speaking to an algorithm who is not even personalizing the conversation, because what is being responded is something that it is trained on. It is trained to tell you, yeah, everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be fine. It is trained to tell you, please tell me more. It is constantly programmed to make you engage with it. So financial incentivization of the model is to make you continue to engage with it. And for that, what you are thinking is therapy, for the model it is only engagement. And therefore, to find a fine distinction between what is therapy and what is simply an engaging conversation that is making you feel good, that distinction most of the young adults may not be able to draw. यहाँ तक भी ठीक था. No problem if people are getting support while there is dearth of a lot of therapists, and especially adoption of therapy as a means to cope with our problems in our society. That's all right. The bigger problem is the kind of intimate conversations that are being held is generating tons and tons of data. Now, where is this all data going? How is the data being used? What is happening to all this data and the information that is processed out of our data? So imagine our biggest vulnerabilities today are known to somebody who's unknown to us. And therefore, today the situation is so grim that there is no law to protect that data. There is no control over that data and the information generated out of that data. There is no protection of that conversation between us and the chatbot to tomorrow not make it available in public domain, and we are just a hack away from what may convert into a social disaster. Because imagine a situation where all of our chats are tomorrow leaked in a data leak incident. Now imagine our deepest vulnerabilities, our biggest secrets, our entire privacy goes for a toss. And unfortunately, as a lawyer, my biggest worry is that where are the laws to protect us? Where are the laws to protect our children? Where are the laws to protect the youth of this country? देखिए, बहुत सारी conspiracy theories थी, and don't get me wrong, I'm an avid AI user. I use it as a tool. But the moment you start using a tool as a means to your life or as your own support system, which tomorrow may threaten your very existence, I think that's where the problem begins, and that's where the protection of the laws should be available to all of us. देखिए, most jurisdictions में your conversation with a therapist are privileged communications. उनको कोर्ट में आपको रिवील करने के लिए फोर्स नहीं किया जा सकता है जब तक it is not required to protect life of somebody, in very, very stark cases. Even in the new Mental Health Care Act, there are certain provisions of confidentiality. But in India, there is clearly no privilege to a client and therapist communication. Now imagine that conversation being done with a chatbot. Only God knows what is the level of privacy and privilege involved in that conversation. More so, there is a bigger difficulty. अगर हम conspiracy theories में believe करें, alternate theories में believe करें, so someday super intelligence may become the cause of human doom, is also what a lot of AI experts speak about. Now imagine, how will AI make it happen? If the entire youth of not only our country but the world is dependent on AI and chatbots to get therapy, and their actions can be defined through that chatbot. Imagine how many hands and legs are available to that super intelligence to act against the very humanity it was built to serve. So the problem is much bigger than what we envisage. It is not just plain simple therapy. You're having a bad day and you type something on the keyboard and you get a response that lightens up your day. We're not talking about that. We're talking about relationship problems. We're talking about spousal issues. We're talking about issues with children. All of this is out there without any protection. Interestingly, I decided to go to the terms of use of ChatGPT and check what do they say about the terms of use. So they categorically mention, do not take the output of this chatbot as the only truth and do verify the resource, and please do not seek professional advice from this tool. Now, what does this mean? It means that the makers themselves are warning you against the use of ChatGPT or any of the chatbots to not be used as professional advice, but we're just doing this out of the ordinary, without the protection of laws, without the protection of the guardrails that should be built around such powerful yet dangerous tools. Now, what I would like to see happen, I think the world is talking about it at the moment, but nobody has acted so far. I don't recall any jurisdiction that I know which has already built laws around what is to be done with this data. I was listening to an interview of Sam Altman, who is the CEO of ChatGPT. He himself was saying,
we think that regulatory intervention by governments will be critical to mitigate the risks of increasingly powerful models.
He sounded helpless about the fact that tomorrow if a law enforcement agency is coming to me and wanting me to share that data, I will have no option but to share that data. Now imagine, we all have bad days and a young person has suicidal thoughts or thoughts to murder somebody. Now those are just thoughts. There is no bad intent. These are thoughts that later when somebody chats with the chatbot, they subdue, they pass. But tomorrow, if the same thoughts that you discussed can be used against you as evidence in the court of law, what will you do? Where is your privacy? It is like I being incriminated about the thoughts that were floating in my head. Is that fair? Is that just? So I think as a proactive nation and having the demographic dividend of having so many young people, it is our duty to protect all of them from the dangers that are being clearly seen by the world at large, that these conversations, these data, and the use of this data should be protected and not in the manner where the system is being misused against us or the AI itself turning against us. So I think a lot of regulation needs to come around it, and the faster we realize the urgency of the situation and the faster we act, the better. Our legislatures, our lawmakers need to rise to the occasion and do something about it. Every single conversation with an AI today will tomorrow add up to a collective information source that can be used not only against them in person but also against us as a nation. Because somebody is out there knowing what are we thinking, what are our problems, what are we made of, and how are we being trained to cope with them. Now that's, to my mind, the most dangerous thing that I've ever encountered as a lawyer. So while we have the Data Protection Act, but I am not sure if chatbots like ChatGPT, etc., are being considered as data fiduciaries. I'm not sure whether they are keeping all this data with consent. I'm not sure whether our laws are powerful enough tomorrow to make sure that they are deleting this data and not misusing it in any manner. I'm not sure that we have the extent and visibility of where this data is going. A collective, I'm not sure if the entire legal system presently is capable of monitoring and controlling the misuse of this data in any manner. So I think the urgent and the most urgent task for our legislators is to create a framework of laws that categorically understand these models and then frame laws to protect common citizens who are bearing their soul to these chatbots. The second commonplace occurrence that we see is use of these chatbots as legal advisors. Now, I think to this extent, most of us are clear that जब आप एक लॉयर के साथ बात करते हैं तो वो एक प्रिविलेज्ड कम्युनिकेशन होती है। भारतीय साक्ष्य अधिनियम के अनुसार कोई भी कॉन्वर्सेशन अगर आपने अपने वकील के साथ करी है या कोई भी कागज अपने वकील को दिया है एंगेज होने के बाद, तो वो कोर्ट में एडमिसिबल एज एविडेंस नहीं होता। कोर्ट आपको फोर्स नहीं कर सकती है वो एविडेंस, जो वो कॉन्वर्सेशन या एविडेंस रिवील करने के लिए। अब imagine a situation where you are talking about your legal issues, your problems to a chatbot. सबसे पहली बात, वो conversation privileged नहीं है। और दूसरी सबसे important बात जो मैंने पहले भी बोला, that none of this is considered as professional advice. अच्छा, आप में से बहुत सारे लोग, मुझे नहीं पता जानते भी हैं कि नहीं, that AI has a tendency to hallucinate. मैं किस्सा सुनाता हूँ। मेरे ऑफिस में एक नया एसोसिएट हायर हुआ। He was a young boy, 1 or 2 years experienced, and sounded very promising. And there was a matter we are doing together. So I requested him that I would need his help to get certain research on legal propositions that we were to argue in the court. And you will not believe, one of the best judgments were pulled out by him, absolutely crisp to the point, latest, and the ones laying down the law exactly in the manner that we needed. Now, as we fact-checked ourselves, I realized one day later that none of those case laws ever existed. And I asked him, from where have you got this? He said, sir, I went to ChatGPT, it gave me all of this. Now, this is called hallucination. चैट जीपीटी या कोई भी एआई चैटबॉट का मॉडल इतना ज्यादा प्लीज करना चाहता है आपको कि वो आपको नो बोलना ही नहीं चाहता कि इस प्रोपोजिशन पे कोई लॉ नहीं है, वो आपको प्लीज करने के लिए कुछ भी बोलेगा. नाउ डू यू वांट टू गो टू अ लॉयर दैट hallucinates? Do you want to consult a legal specialist that hallucinates? Or do you want to consult a therapist that hallucinates? Now, this hallucination is not only the result of the AI wanting to please you, but this is also an unexplained mystery by the makers of AI itself. They've not been able to explain why it hallucinates. Is it only because it wants to please? But I'll tell you more instances. As a user, there was a time when I've been using ChatGPT for almost year and a half extensively now, and it sort of knows me. What do I do, what do I think, and what is my belief system, etc, etc. Now this one fine day I tell it that I type on ChatGPT that I need a little framework on some of the thoughts that I shared with it. He said, but first tell me, what do you do? So after 1.5 years of carrying my data, it suddenly says, I don't know who you are. And then I prodded him. I said, look, I'm sorry, I keep calling him. It could be her as well. So I asked it. I said, do you not know me? And in that fraction of a second, it woke up and said, oh, sorry, I forgot. You are this, that, you're a lawyer. This is what you believe in. I'm sorry, I'll just do it now. Now, this is a completely unexplained phenomena that why it suddenly forgot. So, even if there is a claim that chatbots have become very advanced, they've become specialized, they can do specialized trainings, they can get trained on specialized data, still, where is the bug? None of us knows. And when will that bug start working against us? None of us know. So, for the people who still feel that an advice by ChatGPT can replace the wisdom and the context of sound legal professionals that they must consult, I would only say all the best, but I would also throw in a word of caution that all of these conversations also belong in your private domain and tomorrow can be used as evidence. For example, आप suppose कीजिए that there is somebody who has committed a wrong, किसी से कोई गलती हो गई, and they immediately went to ChatGPT and said, मेरे से गलती हो गई है, tell me how can I escape the legal loop. Now ChatGPT will advise whatever it wants to advise, and when I say ChatGPT, please see me as speaking about all the chatbots in general. Now ChatGPT would give some solution to the concerned person. Now tomorrow that same chat can be used against you in the court of law because you were trying to seek legal advice, admitting to committing a crime, and it was not privileged. A similar conversation with a lawyer is absolutely privileged and can never be used against you in a court of law. So understand how superficial the entire conversation can be and how it can be used against anybody. Sometimes you may generally want to discuss with a chatbot about the consequences of certain actions while you're not contemplating them. आप सिर्फ जानना चाहते हैं कि ऐसा करने पे क्या होगा, और coincidentally अगर वो incident आपके साथ हो जाए, then imagine the situation that you are in. All it needs is to seize your laptop. The police will seize your laptop, find out your chats, see that you were talking about it. It will clearly indicate some kind of guilt in your mind while there is none. So please do it at your own risk. For the time being, I think, and I'm a big advocate of using AI and technology in our daily lives, I feel these are great tools to use. I feel these are this kind of technology is making our jobs much simpler. We are letting the mundane daily grind of our work being delegated and thinking about more powerful things, more powerful concepts, more powerful solutions. But if we let them become somebody we are dependent on for our intellectual work, for our core work, I think we're making a big mistake at the moment. You do not use a tool to live your life for you. You use it to make your life simpler. And you do not make that tool your life itself, like I'm noticing some of us are doing. So my advice will be that please be very careful and mindful of what you do when you speak to an AI chatbot, whether it's legal advice, whether it's journal advice, whether it's therapy. And I appeal to the government of today's date, I appeal to the legislature that please implement laws around the use of AI chatbots, privacy of data, privilege of communications, and journal privacy around any of the discussions that somebody is having with a chatbot. I think we have a long way to go. AI will simply transform the way we interact today with our family, with our friends, with the world at large. And therefore, it's important that it grows within a legislative framework with legislative guardrails. Otherwise, it will become a menace that none of us will be able to control.